Welcome back to Darren Knows. So, modern monetary theory. Have you heard of it? Modern monetary theory is an economic framework that fundamentally rethinks how governments with sovereign currencies operate fiscally. Let me break down its key principles and implications. Okay, so basically, MMT's foundational insight is that governments that issue their own currency, like the US, Japan, or the UK, are not financially constrained in the same way households or businesses are. These governments can never run out of money or be forced into involuntary defaults on debts denominated in their own currency because they created the currency. So basically, for MMT, modern monetary theory, to fully apply, a country must have a sovereign currency, meaning it issues its own currency, borrows in that currency, and has a floating exchange rate. This distinguishes countries like the US from Eurozone nations, which use a shared currency they don't individually control. Taxes don't fund spending in MMT. The framework basically says the government spending comes first. When the federal government spends, it credits bank accounts, creating money. Taxes then destroy money by removing it from circulation rather than funding spending. Taxes serve to create demand for the currency, control inflation, and redistribute resources. Since currency issuing governments can create money, MMT argues that the actual limit on government spending isn't financial, but really the productive capacity of the economy. Spending beyond the economy's ability to produce goods and services causes inflation, not deficits themselves. MMT says unemployment is a policy choice. Its proponents argue that involuntary unemployment represents unused productive capacity. A government could always offer a job to anyone willing to work through a federal job guarantee program, limited only by inflation concerns. Congress spending authorizes spending. The Treasury instructs the Federal Reserve to credit bank accounts. Money is created through keystrokes. Taxes later remove some money from circulation. Any gap between spending and taxation is called a deficit, but it represents net financial assets added to the private sector. That's basically how government spending works in this view. This theory suggests that governments should spend enough to maintain full employment, use taxes to manage inflation and achieve social goals, not to pay for programs, and stop worrying about deficit levels per se and focus on inflation and resource utilization, in addition to implementing a job guarantee as an automatic economic stabilizer. Critics argue MMT underestimates inflation risks and that rapidly expanding money supply could trigger runaway inflation or hyperinflation. Even if MMT is technically correct, critics note political difficulty in raising taxes or cutting spending once inflation appears. So there's debate about when exactly an economy reaches its productive capacity and how quickly inflation responds to increased spending. MMT may work differently for countries whose currencies aren't widely held as reserves, like the US dollar, potentially facing exchange rate crises. So how does this differ from mainstream economics? Basically, traditional economics treats government budgets similar to household budgets. You need revenue, taxes, before you can spend. MMT flips this, arguing the sequence is spend first, tax later, with deficits representing the difference. Mainstream economists often accept some MMT insights about monetary operations while rejecting the policy conclusions. The theory has gained attention particularly during discussions about funding major programs like Medicare for All or the Green New Deal, with supporters arguing these are affordable if inflation is managed, while critics warn of fiscal recklessness. You're not going to want to miss what's next, and they did not teach you this in school.